Hi, this is Miss Klemme, and welcome to the podcast on bone, form, and function. To kick things off, I want to dispel a myth that your parents always say, drink milk for strong bones. Well, sure, that's true, but if we take a look at this table, we can actually see that maybe parents should change their message. Maybe they should be saying, eat your Brussels sprouts, because Brussels sprouts actually help your body absorb the most calcium from them. Over half of the calcium in Brussels sprouts is absorbed, whereas in milk, it's a lot lower. It's at 32%. So maybe you want to correct your parents if they constantly tell you got to drink milk for strong bones. You should be eating Brussels sprouts. But I digress. That is one of the functions of bone. But let's start off with the easier ones. The first function we can see here, well, it's a rib cage. And what does a rib cage do for your body? One thing it does, and with all the bones in your body, it offers support. Think about if we didn't have a skeletal system. Those bones, or all those organs wouldn't have anything to attach to and hold themselves up. The second function that the rib cage provides is a pretty obvious one, and that's protection. Look at that. You can see the lungs are packed in there, the heart, the liver, the pancreas, the stomach. The rib cage is a cage that holds in and protects those delicate organs. Think about your cranium. Protects a pretty important organ. So all bones offer support and protection. In addition, they also do some more things than that. They help with movement. In fact, your bones are the organ that moves you directly. Your muscles don't move you directly. Your muscles just attach to your bones and they tug on them, and then the bones are actually what's moving your body. The other function that we already talked about, milk, well, I could change that to Brussels sprouts here. But what are they doing? They're giving calcium into your bones by drinking them or eating them. And what your bone does with that calcium, not only does it make your bones stronger, but it keeps the calcium levels in your body in homeostasis. For example, say your calcium levels get too high, your bones can release can absorb some extra calcium to lower it. And vice versa, if the blood calcium levels in your body get too low, bone can release some of that as well. So it can go back and forth and keep your calcium levels in check. And the last function of bone is over here, and that's blood cell production. Okay, and this is the ball of a femur. You can see there's two types of marrow inside there. And so marrow is the stuff that's inside bones that produces red blood cells and white blood cells. And that's called hematopoiesis. It's a big word. I'll write it in here. Oops. Okay, so that's 3 functions on this slide, 2 functions on the last slide. Make sure you know those. Now we're going to move on to more of the form of bone and the different shapes. The first type of bone are long bones in your upper and lower arms and your upper and lower legs. In the picture here, that's the femur bone. Short bones include the carpals and tarsals. The carpals are all the little tiny bones in your wrist. Tarsals, the synonymous bone in your ankles. Bones in your ankles. Then there's the flat bones, like the bones that make up your cranium, the frontal bone or the temporal, parietal, occipital, those kinds of bones. Or in the picture shown, that third bone is half of your hip region. The large flat bone that's sticking out here is called the ilium. And so you have another bone over here that makes up your other hip bone. That's a great drawing. And then the last one that's going to be covered up by my other half of my pelvic region is our irregular bones, like the vertebrae in your back. And so the vertebrae have a lot of processes that stick off. This one's called the spinous process, etc. So those are the main categories of bones. If we want to look a little more detail at the long bones, here's a long bone. This is actually, let's see here, just a generic long bone. And if we look at the ends first, those are called the epiphyses, and they're made of spongy bone, which does look really porous like a sponge. And we'll take a closer look at the structure of spongy bone on a different podcast. In the middle of the two epiphyses are the diaphyses, and this is, I always tend to think of diameter, diaphysis. It's the middle portion of the bone. Now covering the diaphysis is something called the periosteum. And I want you to make sure you remember this prefix, peri. Oops, if I can get it right. Peri just means to surround or cover the outside of. And we'll see this prefix later on when we study other organs, that they have peri coverings, if you will. But that's only on the diaphysis, because on the epiphyses are articular cartilage. And this is cartilage in between two bones where the bones meet. They articulate, or there's a joint, so that we don't have bone-on-bone friction. Now if I clear those off, what's left is the inside of the bone. And the inside of the bone is called the medullary cavity, and this is where that particular bone marrow is stored. And that bone, the inner portion of the bone that makes up the medullary cavity, is covered with an endosteum. So if you imagine, let's see if I can draw a cross section of bone. So and here's the medullary cavity, I'll just say MC. The outer covering is the periosteum, and the inner lining is the endosteum. Okay, so that's the major structure of long bone.